Hello and welcome to another episode of Devo with Doug. I'm Doug Campbell and I'm glad you joined me again today as we dig into God's Word here. I'm kind of on the side of the house here trying to restrict some of that wind. I apologize for sometimes that wind gets pretty loud on these recordings, and so I apologize for that and try to keep that under control. Today we're going to continue on into the Hall of Faith, or the Heroes of Faith, however you want to say it, but it's Hebrews chapter 11. And today is the second part of Be Like Abraham. Right, so Be Like Abraham part 2. You know, he's obviously had great faith, and there's so much to cover here with Abraham, and I'm just brushing the surface. So I'm glad that you're along with me for the ride, and I'm going to start off with the account in Hebrews here, chapter 11, verses 17 through 19. So start off with me in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 through 19. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. Even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned," Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. And figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. All right, so we're going to, in a few seconds here, we're going to jump into that account in Genesis. You notice that we haven't even got out of the book of Genesis yet. All these heroes of faith. Genesis is such a great book of the Bible, such a great introduction to God's Word, and there's so much that we learn from that book. And Abraham is one of the main people that we learn about, and we learn, like I said, how strong his faith is. And this one really touches home. I mean, this, if any of you have children out there, or if any of you have sons or daughters, it doesn't matter. And if you think about what Abraham, the kind of faith that Abraham had, to put up one of his own children to sacrifice for God, one of his own children. It just it's tough. It's tough to fathom. So let's dig into the account here in Genesis, and it comes in chapter 22. So let's read Genesis 22, verses 1 through 19. Genesis 22, verses 1 through 19. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Like I said, when I read this story, I try to put myself in the place of Abraham. And when I read, when Isaac asks his father, he starts to question what's going on. Where is the burnt offering? Where is the lamb for the burnt offering? It starts to become more and more real. And Abraham correctly and truthfully answered, "The lamb for the burnt offering, God will provide." And then and then in verse 9 we read about Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Like, I try to visualize that. I try to visualize, did his son resist? I mean, was his son wailing and crying and asking, why are you doing this? How much force did Abraham have to make to restrain his son? None of those details are in here, but that's where my mind goes. Okay, because Isaac was just a young boy, probably around the age of my sons, and there's going to be questions. He was already questioning it on the way up the mountain, and then at what point did he realize he was the sacrifice and wonder, why is my dad doing this? Why is he binding me up? And then put yourself in the place of Abraham, where he obviously did have great faith. He didn't hesitate when God asked him to do this. He loaded up his donkey the next morning. He made these arrangements and went to that mountain right away. There was no hesitation. And even when you think about, this was the son, through all the promises that God promised Abraham, through this son would become all these nations. And it's like he never asked, why are you doing that? Why did you have a change of heart? No, he knew God didn't change his heart. And I think that's how Abraham kind of persevered and kept his faith through this. Is, I think he knew God would not go back on his promise. Hebrews tells us he rationalized the power of God being able to bring people back from the dead. And that's one way to rationalize and one way to think about it. But I also think, I think he knew at some point, God, was going to reward him for his faith, was going to, I think he knew, as we know, that God cannot go back on his promises. When he makes a promise, he sticks with it. So perhaps Abraham didn't know how God was going to do it, or how, what was going to become of that mountain, but he knew God was going to keep his promise. Somehow, some way, whether that meant him actually going through and killing his son and God raising Isaac back from the dead, maybe that was one of the things that was going through his head. But nevertheless, it took great faith, because he didn't know how God was going to fulfill his promise. He did not know the details, but he had faith in God. And obviously, we need to be more like Abraham. Abraham had great faith with leading up until this point, knowing that God was going to deliver him a son that was going to, that would be blessed and make descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. He knew, he had faith that God was going to bless him with this son at an old age, at Sarah's old age. So I think that faith just continued to carry over into this account. But think about our own lives, when we have faith that God is going to do something for us, or use us for something in a kingdom sense. He uses us. We can see him use us in our aspects of life, and we can see us playing that small role in the kingdom effort. And sometimes that's not enough, Sometimes we can reflect and say, I had faith there, God came through for me, and then we turn right around and don't have faith in the next instance. And those are the times where it's like, well, why did I trust God here, but I'm not trusting him with this? Or maybe I even trusted him and had faith in God to handle something very major in my life, and he did, and he came through. And then I go to something very simple and I try to do it myself and fall flat on my face and fail. And then I'm like, okay, why did I trust God and have faith in God and even see the results that he came through? And then I turned around and I didn't have faith here. So just because Abraham had great faith in this one instance doesn't necessarily mean, well, of course, he had faith in God that, he wasn't going to kill Isaac, or no, it's not, of course. It's a give credit to Abraham for continuing to have that strong faith in God, because I know I've been more sporadic in my faith. I like I said, I've had times where I've had faith, and then I've had other times where I don't, and I don't trust God. And then I sit back and say, well, why didn't I trust God in that instance? Why was I not even seeking God's, will? Why was I going out on my own when he's had my back in all these instances? And it took faith, I can see in my past, my own walk of faith, good or bad. So it's like, when I don't have faith, usually nothing good comes of that. almost always actually. Why don't I learn from that? You know what I'm saying? So that's why we need to read these accounts of these heroes of faith, because we need to be more like them in our own faith walk, in our own faith with God. We need to be consistent in our faith. And that's what Abraham is. He's the model of consistent faith in God. And I want to be more like Abraham in that way. I want to be more consistent with my faith. And I hope you do too. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys today. I thank you for joining me, and let's continue to be consistent in our faith, and let's continue to be more like Abraham. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Grace and peace.